BARK Radio.
What's good, everybody? Happy Thanksgiving. It's Robo from All Bark back with another video, and today I'm bringing my NFL Week 13 picks. I'm picking every game this year, both straight up and against the spread, and keeping track of my weekly and yearly results. But before we get into Week 13 picks, let's go ahead and recap last week's results on the channel. Last week was a huge rebound for me, going 11-2 picking winners, and back in the green against the spread, going 7-5-1, pushing that Cardinals +3 as they fell in overtime. I almost nailed the week perfectly, with the Cardinals almost pulling off the upset and the Eagles having a 21-point lead that they blew to Dallas. But I can never be mad at a green week and an 11-win one as well. So with that said, let's get started with this week's matchups, starting with Thanksgiving Day. Our 1 p.m. Thanksgiving game is of course in Detroit with the Lions taking on the Packers. It wouldn't be Thanksgiving without both the Lions and the Cowboys having games and the Lions kicking the week off. We saw this matchup in Green Bay in week 1 where the Lions came out super flat. The offensive line got absolutely punished in both run blocking and pass pro, and Jared Goff had a disaster performance leading to a 27-13 Lions loss. However, this time around the game is in Detroit. Ford Field is going to be absolutely rocking, and the Packers offense looks worse than it did early on in the season. The O-line's become a serious problem, and this Lions team has had some great days and is starting to finally run block pretty well. The issue that could sway this game to the Packers again, though, is the line. Glasgow has been bad this year, but him being out is yet another starter for the Lions down, and this Packers D-line can get after Goff. But the same can also be said on the other end. Detroit doesn't get a ton of pressure outside of Hutchinson, but this Packers line may change that. Love gets pressured a ridiculous amount, and the Lions are good at stuffing the run. I think this one is very close and could go either way, but I wouldn't trust many coaches more than Dan Campbell in a revenge spot. So I'm going to take the Lions here, 27-23. Next up, like I just said, it would not be Thanksgiving without the Cowboys playing, and this week they're at home up against the Kansas City Chiefs. This now looks like an incredible matchup as the Cowboys season has a lot of life again after beating up on Vegas and then forming a 21-point comeback to upset the Eagles last week. Just a massive win for Dallas that now positions themselves with a chance at the playoffs if they keep stacking wins. And this Chiefs team is pretty vulnerable this year. Some weeks they don't look great, and some others they do. I actually love this matchup for CD and Pickens, though, as there aren't really any secondaries in the NFL that can take both of them away for Dak, and the Dallas offense is absolutely grooving right now. We've also seen that defense take a huge step forward after a couple trades and injury returners, and the Chiefs did beat the Colts last week, but it was just not a very impressive performance, honestly. They barely forced overtime to win that game by a field goal, and I kind of was expecting a lot more from them in Arrowhead. I like Dallas here, more so with the 3.5 points, but I'm going to take them to stay hot and keep it rolling with a win here, 31-28. Our final Thanksgiving game is the nightcap with the Bengals at the Ravens. What a huge matchup this is now with Joe Burrow being activated and listed available to play for the Bengals, up against a surging Ravens team that has won 5 straight now and positioned themselves in a great spot to win their division now that they're finally healthy. I want to pause a little bit when I say healthy though, because I think it's clear Lamar Jackson is not 100%. He doesn't really look himself fully, and he's been missing practices here and there to rest. As a result, this offense has kind of been struggling a bit in these wins. It just doesn't look like the Ravens we all know. That's not to say they won't win this game. I think this defense has looked pretty solid, and the offense will still be able to run the football and score on a very bad Bengals defense. I just don't really love this spread up at 7 points, and I kind of really like the under here with no T. Higgins for Burrow and a beat-up Lamar for Baltimore. I am going to take the Ravens at home, though, 24-20. Our Black Friday game is Bears at Eagles. This one I actually feel pretty strongly about. I've said it several times now throughout the season. The Bears feel like a worse version of last year's Commanders. The team whose schedule sets them up for success, and they're a good enough offense to go out there and score, but are not nearly as good as their record. And they continue to prove me right, scraping by a fairly nice schedule. And this week, it's by far their toughest matchup yet, going on the road at Philly, coming off a tough division loss where they blew a 21-point lead. This team should be pissed off and hungry to go out and beat up on someone. And this Bears team actually ranks as one of the worst 8-3 teams of all time per DVOA. You've got to be decent to be 8-3, so it's not a knock on Chicago. It's just from a statistical standpoint, and I really think they're walking into a bad spot here. I think the Bears score a bit, but Philly comes out super fired up on both sides of the ball at home. I'm going to take the Eagles here, 28-17. We'll start off the Sunday slate with 49ers at Browns. Shedeur Sanders looked pretty good in his first career start last week in Vegas, grabbing the win for the first debut win by a Browns quarterback in forever. I kind of expected the offense to look a little better as he's just got a better arm talent than Gabriel. I was a little worried that his decision-making wouldn't all be there and the offensive line would make life tough on him, and while it wasn't perfect, he did look very solid back there, and I think he just elevates this offense slightly in terms of their ceiling. I still don't expect much out of this Browns team the rest of the way, as they still have major issues, and we need to see Shedeur perform against a better defense than Vegas. And this matchup is obviously going to be tough. The Niners defense is banged up this year, but hasn't been bad, and that offense is finally fully healthy, and despite an awful game from Purdy, they still beat the Panthers pretty comfortably. I think we see a slight step back from that Browns offense this week, and the Niners do just enough to avoid a loss here on the road, 20-13. The Jags are on the road again this week, taking on the Titans after just barely surviving in overtime over the Cardinals. It was a game I really thought could be a trap for them, as Arizona was getting slightly underrated as one of the bottom teams in the league, and it nearly ended up right. But Jacksonville survived in advance and now has some real playoff odds if they continue to pick up wins in the games that they can get. And this is yet again another one they can get. This Titans team some weeks looks like they're making some progress, and others they just are completely uncompetitive. But despite some poor advanced numbers, I really like some of the throws and plays Cam Ward's making, and I'm not counting him out as being the guy for Tennessee's future. He impressed me in that second half of the Seahawks game last week, and I still think this Titans defense has a little bit of juice to it to make things competitive against offenses that aren't really loaded. And that's exactly what I see with this Jaguars team. It's a solid team that can definitely sneak into a playoff spot, but not one I would really expect a ton of consistency from, and Lawrence makes enough mistakes to give defenses some opportunities. I think this game ends up closer too, but Jacksonville grabs the win on the road, 24-21. Colts-Texans should be a great game this week, one I'm looking forward to seeing, as despite the loss last week, I was pretty impressed with the Indianapolis Colts going on the road in Arrowhead and nearly taking down Kansas City. They lost in overtime, but just forcing the Chiefs to have to score on the final drive to send it there was an impressive game to me, considering Daniel Jones has kind of hit a hiccup lately. I think it could have given a little bit more confidence in this team, even though the result was an L. This week's going to be another challenge, though, because this Texans defense is the number one group in the NFL to me. That pass rush is something else, and they've got a secondary that could just blanket receivers and force turnovers. I really do not like this matchup for Danny Dimes again this week, but Jonathan Taylor is such a beast. I'd expect him to still get going a bit and put some pressure on Houston's offense to score. And whether it's Stroud or Mills this week, I don't love this offense going on the road and stealing a game from the Colts. I think it goes down to the wire, but Indy comes out on top this week, 23-20. Saints at Dolphins should be a pretty ugly matchup this week. One bad team going on the road at another. However, this Dolphins team has actually looked decent offensively lately and are starting to improve that record, and the schedule up ahead does not look bad at all. With that said, though, it's still a team that I don't trust much. Tua has not been good this year. The offensive line still has a lot of issues, and the defense has gotten manhandled on occasion this year. Last time out, I picked them to lose to Washington overseas, and although it definitely should have ended that way, the Dolphins found a way and came up with another win. This game kind of feels like a similar spot to me. I don't absolutely hate this Saints team, although it's obviously one of the worst in the league, and I just don't see enough for Miami to say they'll go out and win games by multiple scores against anyone. I think this one results in another win, but New Orleans should be competitive enough here to at least make it a game that may end up down to the final possession. I'm going to go with the Dolphins by 3, 26-23. Over to another ugly-looking matchup Sunday, we've got the Falcons on the road to the Jets. Neither of these offenses is very fun right now. It's a backup quarterback battle of Kirk Cousins against Tyrod Taylor. But even despite that, not having Drake London and Garrett Wilson in this game sucks from a viewing standpoint. The Falcons got the win for me last week over the Saints, but it wasn't a great watch as expected. Still a bit of an underrated team, though, with nothing to lose for without their own first-round pick, and this Jets team should be looking for better draft positioning. As rough as it's been for Atlanta, I just can't take the Jets really in any spot for the rest of the season. The Falcons need every win they can get, and I still trust Kirk Cousins enough to beat the Jets. Tyrod's an upgrade from Justin Fields, but it didn't matter last week as the Jets scored just 10 points against the Ravens, who still seem to be struggling throughout most of their wins. So I like Atlanta here on the road, 24-17. The Rams look to continue their dominance this week on the road at the Panthers. A matchup that I think could actually be a bit interesting though, as once again the Bryce Young home and away splits came out to play on Monday night in the loss to the 49ers. Bryce and this offense is obviously better at home, but on top of that fact, I actually want to give a shout out to this Panther defense. They've been sneaky good this season. They are the main reason they took down Green Bay on the road. They forced a bunch of turnovers on Brock Purdy and the Niners last week despite the loss, and for the most part have performed pretty well all year outside of a couple tough games. I don't necessarily think this Rams team comes into Carolina and just steamrolls their way through this game. McVay's an offensive guru, but going on the road across the entire country always can make things a little tougher, and it just feels like a peak market value with the Rams absolutely rolling right now. With a spread up over 10, I kind of trust the Panthers to compete at home on both sides here and at least make it a game, but I don't think LA is going to drop this one in the end. I'm going to go with a 24-16 final. Next is the Cardinals at the Bucks. The Bucks just got smashed by the Rams last week on the road in a pretty tough spot, as the team's still pretty beat up, and then Baker hurt his AC joint, which completely derailed any chance of coming back in that game. And for the Cardinals, I took them to upset the Jags last week, and they nearly did. They forced overtime and were pretty close to getting that one done, but regardless, I was sort of right about them being a bit underrated because of 2 blowout losses in a row, and they're due for a bounce back. However, in this case, going on the road against a team that's got to get back in the win column after 3 straight L's to good teams, This is a spot I really just don't like for Arizona. Jacoby Brissett was fine, but he did go down with an injury in that game, and if it were to happen again here, Kedon Slovis is not somebody I would want to play quarterback in the NFL. I just think this offense is really one-dimensional right now, just throwing it to McBride or Wilson, and the defense is fine, but obviously not a great unit. Tampa Bay is going to need Baker healthy to win tough games, but even likely starting Teddy Bridgewater, I think this Buccaneers team is slightly better than Arizona. They're getting Bucky back, which could be a big boost, and Teddy's obviously got a ton of experience and is getting starter reps in practice all week. So I'll take the Bucs to win this one, 28-21. Now on to the 4 p.m. slate Sunday. We'll start with the Vikings at the Seahawks. It looks like J.J. McCarthy will be out this week with a concussion, so it's Max Brosmer time in Minnesota. That might actually be a good thing, as the pass offense has been horrific with J.J. at quarterback. But time will tell if Brosmer is any better and if he can lead drives down the field with some great weapons around him. The Vikings O-line has been a huge problem that has really hurt McCarthy too, as his pocket presence in the field needs a ton of work, and they make it even worse for him. And given that this Seattle defense held the Rams in check despite giving the ball away a ton and really only got scored on last week after the game was well in hand, I don't see this as a spot where Minnesota scores many points. There's a lot of variance with Brosmer though, as if he's actually solid, they have potential, but I can't trust a what-if scenario against Seattle. I think Sam Darnold goes out there and proves the Vikings wrong about not paying him and letting him go to see what they had in McCarthy. And Seattle's offense has a good enough day against the Vikings that they cover a double-digit spread, 30-13. The Chargers are in need of a win this week pretty badly after getting eviscerated by the Jaguars before last week's bye. It was a good time for the bye as the team was pretty beat up, but the effects of not having Joe Alt or Rashawn Slater hit again, and they gave up a ton of pressure, and Herbert was in hell for most of that game. He's just got no help around him in terms of a running game either, and the Jaguars capitalized, burying them on early. This week should be a much easier matchup for the Chargers though, as this Raiders team is just awful. They just got smacked by the Browns at home in Vegas. I think this defense can get a little pressure on Herbert, but not enough to really make that big of a difference. The Chargers should be able to run the ball a little better, have more guys open early, and the defense should be able to eat. I'm not in love with LA's defense, but it can be a solid unit when it smells blood, and this Raiders offensive line is one they should control. Geno is struggling big time, and I just don't see this as a game they're in late. So give me the Chargers by double digits, 27-14. On to a potentially solid matchup. We've got Josh Allen and the Bills going on the road to take on the Steelers. The Bills are coming off of a loss where Allen just did not look great, and that Texans defense destroyed the Bills O-line. And the Bills defense wasn't terrible at all. It actually had a decent day in terms of getting stops on third down, but they didn't log a single sack on the other end they gave up 8 of them. Just an ugly outing for that Bills offense, and this team continues to look less and less like a contender to me as we go on, even considering that Chiefs loss. Regardless though, Josh Allen is still an elite quarterback, and against lesser defenses, he can absolutely will his offense to wins along with James Cook. And the matchup this week against the Steelers is a tough one, but a winnable one, as Rodgers still has a broken wrist, and Mason Rudolph is not really a guy I trust to go in many games. The Steelers offense just is not good, and the defense has been hit or miss. Last week they weren't bad, but I'm still not a fan of that Bears team even at 8-3. This is a bounce back spot for both teams, but I just trust this Bills offense to figure it out more than I do Pittsburgh. But they're going to have to protect Josh Allen this week if they want to win. I'm going to go with a 30-23 final. Our Sunday night matchup is a bit of an ugly one. The Broncos are on the road at the Commanders. Denver's defense has become one of the top stories in the NFL, just absolutely dominating pretty much everyone they go up against. And this team just proved me wrong, beating the Chiefs a couple weeks ago, marking themselves as one of the better teams in the league. I knew the defense would show up, but Bo Nix and the offense genuinely drove down the field when it mattered and scored on that Chiefs team. This week against the Commanders, they're taking on one of the lesser talented defenses in the NFL and a backup quarterback whose offense around him has been super beat up and not very potent as is. It's hard not to love them in this spot, even on the road, and still having some questions about the consistency of this offense. I just really do not know where many Commanders points come from in this game. Denver's defense should absolutely dominate it from start to finish, basically. And all Denver really should need is a couple touchdowns, and I think they get there as well as a few drives into field goal range. I'm going to take them here to continue winning, 23-13. Monday Night Football this week could be a little fun with the Giants on the road at the Patriots. Obviously, not the best matchup for a Monday night, but the Giants have been super competitive this year and almost just upset the Packers and the Lions. This Patriots team is absolutely rolling, but got a bit of a scare from the Bengals last week and are definitely not a lock to blow this Giants team away. But looking at the matchup, it's definitely hard to see the Patriots losing. Their defense is just playing really well, and Drake May has been one of the best quarterbacks in the league this season. The offensive line did take a bit of a hit, losing Will Campbell to injury, and the Giants' pass rush is very good, which could make this game closer than New England wants. And just the way the Giants' offense has been moving the ball this year, even without the top playmakers, and without Dart the past 2 weeks, I've got a lot of faith they're going to be able to compete here on the road. I just don't think it's going to be enough to beat one of the better teams in the NFL in Foxborough. I'll take the Patriots close, 24-20. That's it for my Week 13 picks. Let me know your thoughts on any of these games in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
BARK Radio.